Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's not a webinar, and it's a conversation with Segun Idowu, Chief of Economic Development and Inclusion for the City of Boston, and the Deputy Chief, Midori Morikawa. And so thank you for joining us today for what will be a very interesting conversation about economic development and the strategy of being as inclusive as possible to bring all, to benefit all of the city of Boston. I want to thank Jay and Colleen from the Business Practice Office and my assistant Julie and everyone here at Nutter for supporting these webinars. Thank you very much. Segun and Midori, welcome. Welcome to Nutter and welcome to our webinar.
Thanks for having us. Great to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. As I said, we've been doing these webinar style during the pandemic and thinking about going back to live. We're starting to do more live events. I'm sure you see more live events in the city, and I'll probably start that in September to get back to it. Is there anything Segun or Midori you'd like to say to open or anything?
Just that it's great to be here. I've been able to join in on these discussions as an audience member. Have always looked forward to it and happy to be here on the stage with you.
Thank you. Well, you know I grill you, don't you? You know I'm.
That's not the part I was looking forward to, but I am happy to be here.
Well, that's not true. But some folks on the call know you both, some don't. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity, and I'll start with you, Midori. If you could just, I'm going to use the phrase, tell us your story. You could just briefly tell us your experience, your background, your professional history, and things you're involved with here in the city, just so folks can get a better sense, get to know you better if they don't know you. Midori?
Great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And I'm just looking through the attendees list, and I recognize so many names. So great to be here with friends and partners for the city of Boston. So again, my name is Midori Morikawa. I'm the Deputy Chief for the Economic Option Inclusion Cabinet. I'm happy to be here. So just a quick background, I won't go through my whole life story, but I was born in Japan. I grew up in Indonesia and Malaysia, and I came to the United States when I was 18 to attend college and graduate school. And this, America this is where really I started and developed my professional network and my career, starting in a nonprofit, ABCD, as the Director of Planning, and it really focused on making sure that we are making a difference and impact in our communities in Boston. And over the last 8 years or so, I've had the privilege of serving under 3 mayors. First under Mayor Walsh, now Secretary Walsh, the Mayor Janey, and now as Mayor Wu. In my role at City Hall, have taken on a number of positions, including at the Office of Workforce Development, really creating a talent pipeline for city residents, and not just traditional jobs, right, but education and but making sure that people are able to access free community college initiative. So I'm happy to talk more about it. And then over the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity to really have a broader focus on small business development, global affairs, tourism, licensing, cannabis, you name it, sort of jack of all trades on that. So now my role at the city is to support Chief Idowu and the mayor on their economic development agenda and priorities on that. So happy to discuss more at the speaking panel today.
Well, thank you. Two comments. One is the workforce development will be a topic that we will be addressing. It's discussed everywhere. Every business group, companies about the workforce. And two, last night I was listening to the radio and I heard a great interview. You mentioned ABCD with John Drew, and of course he's at the age of 80 something. He's retiring and he's been there for over 50 or almost 50 years or 40 years at ABCD. And folks don't know, but ABCD was started with President Johnson back in the 60s. As part of the war on poverty. And so there was a great interview last night that I heard him give on WBZ radio. So Segun, thank you, Midori.
Yeah, well, we'll have to check that out. So my story Yeah, I'll just say that no one expected me to be sitting here before you in this particular position. So I'm Boston bred, and had an interesting trail through the Boston public school system. When I graduated from Latin Academy, as everybody now knows, I left with a 1.9 GPA. And the only reason I keep sharing that is because I always try to remind people that your GPA does not define you, and that, that there are greater things ahead. So I try to be a champion for people, both who graduated with a low GPA, but also short people, because we also can make change happen in the world. So anyway, after leaving or graduating from Latin Academy, I had the opportunity to participate in a program that I think was started under Governor Patrick's administration, if not before, where the UMass system has a program that if you have a low GPA but high SATs, or the inverse of that, that you can attend a UMass college, and but it's more of a remedial classes essentially that allow you to catch up. And so I was able to participate in that and go to Morehouse College in Atlanta, where that was a transformative experience, being in a place with people who look like me, and where it was not, and the city itself, it was not a question about what you could achieve, but how quickly you could achieve it. And so all of that, inspiration to even keep moving forward, and to not settle with where I was when I graduated high school, came from my grandfather, who I bring up every time I'm speaking somewhere. So I'm sure, with all the folks who are joining today, are tired of this particular part of the story. But, my grandfather was a huge presence in my life as a pastor in Malden, of the Emmanuel Baptist Church. He attended Morehouse College as well, and wound up befriending, at that time, Michael King, who later became Martin Luther, and became one of the chief lieutenants of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference here in Boston, alongside Virgil Woods and others. And so anyway, all of that experience got poured into me as a kid, and then growing up, where he would visit from Hartford every few months or so. And so there was a saying that he left with me that everyone is familiar with: not to confuse motion with progress. And that is what has inspired all of my footsteps since telling me that 10 years ago, this past January. And so when I came back from school, the first job I had was here in City Hall, working for Councilor Charles Yancey at that time. I got a lot of experience in terms of engaging with people and understanding city government. And when I left that role, I went to go work at the Edward M. Kennedy Institute for the United States Senate before they moved to their Columbia Point location, was part of that founding team, and there learned about the important role of federal government and how we hope to reshape it to be as impactful as it was back in Senator Kennedy's time. And left there, was inspired to run for office myself for a state representative over in Hyde Park. And the best thing in the world ever happened to me, which is the fact that I lost that race. And as a result of losing that race, but learning a lot, the board at that time of the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts reached out to me, offered me the role of executive director. And that was probably the most important and impactful position I've had until this particular role. And so spent 3 years at BECMA, and now I am here serving as the Chief of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion. So that's a quick snapshot.
Well, thank you. Just two points. Your story about UMass and the low GPA, that's really, I'm a former UMass trustee. And, the role of UMass Boston, I'll talk about UMass Boston particularly, is to give opportunities to young people, to students, and not always traditional students, who may not meet all the criteria. I had a recent meeting with the new chancellor, and I'm pleased to say he understands the mission there very well. And it's kids like you who benefited from that experience and then turned it into something, somewhere else. And UMass Dartmouth does the same down there in that part of the state and other places. So it's a great thing. You hate to see, everybody wants to get better and better. You just hope that there's always room at the end for kids who may not fit in those boxes. In the could you just briefly talk for a moment just about the Black Economic Council for a second, just a little bit for the audience, and what was its mission? What's its role? I know it's statewide. Can you just give us a little snapshot of that for a second, Segun?
Yeah, and I'm smirking there because 6 months after not being the president, I still remember a little bit of the pitch from the BECMA days. The mission of the organization is to advocate for Black businesses across the state, and to connect those businesses to resources and opportunities. And it was founded before I got there. A lot of people think that I'm the person that founded the organization. I very much did not. The organization was founded in 2015 as a result of the Color of Wealth report that the Fed had put out at that time. And so, there were many strategies and policies and programs that people put into effect following the release of that report, and some of the startling details that they at that time were sharing. And BECMA was one of the things that came out of that conversation, because there was the realization that many issues impacting the Black community had an organization or a series of organizations that represented those interests. But when it came to the business community, there was no singular organization advocating for Black businesses. And so this organization, which was co-founded by folks like Darryl Settles and Terry Williams and Terrell Calloway and Reggie Nunnally and so many others, Aaliyah and Glenn Lloyd, they founded it then, and I joined in November of 2018, after 3 years that they had been laying the groundwork for the organization. So since I was at the organization, I would say the only difference between me and the board, who were a working board 3 years before me, is that it just became my job 24/7 to focus on building up and out the organization. So I don't at all take credit for the success the organization found itself in the last couple of years, but it was really the work of the board of directors and the members of the organization and the team that wound up coming on board in the last year that have helped to advance that mission to impact Black businesses across the state.
Well, thank you very much. Question questions: does the council interact a lot with the other business organizations? I'm on a number of them, and whether it's the roundtable that you spoke at last year and or others.
Yeah, absolutely. That's again part of the success of the organization, that that it built partnerships with people that were already doing a lot of important work in the community and across the state. I grew up here in the city, seeing a lot of nonprofits operating in silos. And I will say that one of the very thin silver lines of the pandemic is that it forced a lot of people to have to work together and kind of navigate this virtual space that we're in. And what I'm happy to see is that that is persisting beyond, kind of returning to normal life, with areas of the pandemic subsiding. But, again, before the pandemic, a lot of people were, especially as nonprofits, were trying to tackle an issue by themselves, to be the superhero of the day. And I did not want to replicate that. I remember growing up and saying, I don't want to be, if I'm part of an organization, I don't want to replicate what I see as not working. And so whether it be, JD at the roundtable, who was a phenomenal partner, and I don't know if he's here today, but, he and his team. Okay. Well, give people their flowers, JD was a fantastic partner, particularly around the George Floyd conversations and taking actionable steps. There was the Boston Chamber Mass Competitive Partnership, John Regan and AIM, but then with other like organizations, whether it was Amplify, Foundation for Business Equity, CWE. I mean, I could take up honestly the whole time talking about the amazing partners, but BECMA would not be where it is today if it weren't for our partners, or their partners, I should say.
JAS, the competitive partnership, is on the line as well.
Great.
The mayor's office, a lot of folks are not familiar with it. The mayor's office of economic opportunity and inclusion. So I'd like you both to sort of describe the office. What's its mission? I know there's various departments within it, and you have you have a mission that's quite aggressive. Make Boston a global model of economic equity for working people, entrepreneurs, businesses, and investors. That's a boatload of stuff. So if you could please, all good, aspirational. I mean, but it's an aggressive agenda. So if each of you, I'll start with you, Segun, to go over to Midori. To talk about the office a little bit, so folks can get familiar with it. And I'd like you to think about in the audience, you know, this is how we can be helpful to you if you're a business out there, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're an investor, or you're someone in the neighborhood. This is where you go if you need this kind of help.
Mhm. Well, you're absolutely right. It's a Herculean effort that we are undertaking, but we are in a special moment, I think, in the history of not just the city, but the country, of addressing long-standing issues that we have just been kicking down the road, or placing Band-Aid solutions on. And what I'm proud of, and one of the reasons I joined the administration, is that we have a mayor and my colleagues in government now that are committed to exactly what you said. This idea of repairing the economic harm, of creating economic equity here in the city, and being that model for the rest of the country. And so this all came about, when I joined the administration. One of the things that the mayor and I talked about before I said yes was, just what the future of what was formerly called the Office of Economic Development should be. And so, we changed the name really for one reason, and it was the fact that when she engaged a lot of Bostonians on the campaign trail, or even in her work as a city councilor for the 10 years before, and then myself, either at BECMA or just growing up in the city and participating in numerous conversations, when people hear the term economic development, there's a negative reaction to that term. And the fact that, when they think about or see economic development, what they believe they see are the cranes in the skies and the negative impact that that's having on them. They think of the rising cost of housing, issues with transportation, et cetera. And so what was important to me and the mayor is that before people meet me or Midori or anybody else on the team, that they understand exactly what it is that we're doing and who we're doing it for. And so while our goal is to continue to foster important and lucrative opportunities for people and businesses here in the city of Boston, at the end of the day, everything that undergirds our work is this idea of equity, and really racial equity. And so that inclusion piece was added at the end there, so that people know upfront that that is what our focus is on. And so we are carrying forth our work in 4 different ways, and I'll stop talking after this because I'm dominating too much. So there are 4 buckets of work that we're focused on. One is COVID recovery. So the idea that we're laying down the infrastructure to, when we finally get out of COVID, that the infrastructure is there to help people move from survival mode to thriving. The second is neighborhood revitalization, this idea of transforming and turning our neighborhoods into destinations. The third is shifting city investments. So making sure that when it comes to our procurement standards and policies, that we are putting our money where our mouth is, literally, and making sure that when we're investing in companies and awarding contracts, that we are doing so in an equitable way. And then the final piece is prosperity for all, which is our catch-all bucket for our workforce development strategies, and other issues like enhancing our global competitiveness, et cetera. All of these things, these strategies together, are going to make sure that we are actualizing part of that mission that you read out, of becoming that global model of economic equity.
Midori, anything you'd like to add to that?
I think, Bill, to your earlier question, just to give people a flavor of our office and who we are a little bit. So, within the cabinet, we have a number of departments that we oversee. One is the Office of Small Business unit. And over the last 2 years, during COVID, we've given out over $25 million to over 4,000 businesses in the city of Boston in the form of grants. But in addition to that, we help small businesses with technical assistance, and make sure that businesses who started their business here can stay and grow and be in Boston. We also oversee Office of Tourism, Sports, Entertainment. So the recent win for the administration on the FIFA World Cup and Army Navy game, where thanks to our team's effort and the leadership of Segun and the mayor. Office of Supply and Workforce Diversity is around making sure the city contracts go to Black BIPOC communities on that. And I've let Segun sort of talk about the recent accomplishments we had since due to his leadership. Office of Consumer Affairs and Licensing, so that oversees licensing, liquor license, entertainment licensing, cannabis licensing for the city of Boston, as well as Office of Workforce Development, which Bill, you alluded to the importance. And I know certainly a lot of the audiences here today are really leading that great work with Jay and JD and Lauren Jones online.
Well, two of the issues that I had talked about earlier, which are good, that I didn't have on, I hadn't thought about to the weekend with the neighborhoods, was the initiative to have more liquor licenses in the neighborhood. So restaurants, you talk about Mattapan, I'm Lower Mills, talk about Mattapan, there's no real restaurants there that you can sit and have a beer or alcohol with dinner, and then at Lower Mills there is. And two, the cannabis, I've been following the cannabis equity. I had a cup of coffee with a friend of mine who served on the commission, and she educated me about the amount of money it costs to get into that business. And folks in the neighborhood want to get into that business. That's two examples that you see, Midori. That's under your jurisdiction.
That is correct.
Okay. Well, the inclusion part, I interpreted it. You talked about racial equity. I interpreted inclusion when I saw the term broader, meaning that if you have economic development, say in the downtown, which we have, I'm in the Seaport, and the entire city would in some way benefit from that. From that, that's the way that I interpreted it in my own mind, that the benefit would flow in some way, whether it's funding through tax benefits or whatever it might be, but that it just wouldn't stay in one place, but that the benefit from the downtown development would flow out to other parts of the city. And I guess I would include in that the racial equity part of it because of the neighborhoods. But that's how I interpreted it in my own mind, Segun.
Yeah, well, I would say I kind of look at it flipping it. So, first of all, one of the reasons that all of our companies and government and even families at the dinner table are talking about equity is because we all watched a lynching 2 years ago of a man named George Floyd. And the result of that was now a conversation on racial equity because there was a lot of other people were discovering the fact that just because we had elected a Black president did not mean that all of the issues impacting Black and Brown communities had been solved. And so, in my work at BECMO, one of the things that we kept pushing was that, in helping Black and Brown communities, addressing the issues, not through charity, but through substantively addressing the issues, whether it was around housing, whether it was around who we're awarding contracts to, how we're making our investments in companies or in land, et cetera. All of that actually does wind up having a positive benefit on the broader economy. I'll give you two examples. One is Citigroup put out a report in August of 2020, I believe, that showed that since the year 2000, the nation, America, has lost out on $16 trillion of potential economic growth because of its warm embrace of systemic racism just between Black and white communities. That is a staggering figure, and it has had negative repercussions across the entire country, of which we are dealing with even today. The second report I'll mention was from the Mass Taxpayer Foundation, and I really have to give them credit, particularly Eileen. And I'm sorry to read that she is stepping down later this year, but definitely wish her success in her future endeavors. They undertook this report that they published last year, April of 21, that showed that if Massachusetts were to address systemic racism, again, just between Black and white families, in the issues of education, business, et cetera, that we would add $25 billion to the state economy over the next 5 years, right? So for me, a focus on racial equity is not really, it's not ignoring anybody else, but really it's about being intentional about addressing longstanding issues that are causing all of our communities to miss out on economic prosperity. So, the way I look at it is, the development of some communities cannot coexist with the underdevelopment of others. And so downtown or Seaport or Back Bay can never say that they've reached the full potential of economic growth and prosperity if Mattapan is underdeveloped, or Roxbury is underdeveloped, or parts of Dorchester. And so for me, it's about, yes, addressing past harms, but also it's an investment in the future, that if all parts of our communities are doing very well, then we only have further to go in terms of growth. But so long as others are playing catch up, it will depress all other communities because of the fact that we have to continue addressing that. So you're absolutely right. I mean, what I would love to see happen is that the prosperity of the neighborhoods you mentioned, downtown Seaport, do actually filter to the rest of the city, and that they see the benefits of the development that's happening in these communities. The problem is that we haven't seen that happen as quickly as these neighborhoods would love to see it. And I'd love to kind of shift the scales a little bit and make sure it's balanced, that as we are continuing to support the growth of the downtown and Seaport and Back Bay areas, that we are also focused on the rest of the city, making sure that they are growing at a similar rate.
Well, two things. First of all, Eileen McInerney, I'm on her board. She's on the program today.
Great.
So she is. We'll say hello to Eileen, and that was a nice comment you made about her, and it's very accurate. There are a lot of folks from the neighborhood, I'm pleased to see, who do work, there are jobs. I see the young people coming into the Seaport, working in some of the stores that are coming up, in the restaurants and the different businesses, and that's always the way it's been. When I grew up, where I did in Fields Corner, we all worked in town, whether it was Filene's or Jordan Marsh, whatever it might have been. We all came into work, so it's there. How would you articulate the city's economic strategy going forward? What are your methods? What's your focus? But what is the strategy that drives the Wu administration, and as a result, your office?
Well, I would say it's these four that I mentioned earlier of COVID recovery, neighborhood revitalization, shifting city investments, prosperity for all. And, I will say that I mentioned earlier in the opening about silos, and what we are committed to is not replicating that even in how we operate as a cabinet, because some of the issues that I mentioned may not be the focus or the work of my cabinet, but certainly are impacting the areas that we focus on. So, housing, transportation. My cabinet does not address housing issues or transportation, but we certainly work very closely with Sheila Dillon, who's the chief of housing, and Yasha Franklin Hodge, who's the chief of streets, because it's all interconnected. There is no such thing as this is just economic opportunity and inclusion stuff. This is just housing stuff. They're all related. And so I will say that in addition to those four categories I mentioned earlier as being our strategy and our focus for this year and the years remaining, we are also like the chiefs are, it's a true cabinet. And I wasn't here in previous administrations. I don't know how they were operated before, but I will say that what I have been very appreciative of is how other chiefs and department heads are not operating in a silo, really at the direction of the mayor, who came in and said, everyone has to work together. But that, we are weekly meeting to talk about these issues and identify strategies that we can work on together.
Well, that was going to be a question you anticipated, and that was, how do you work as a cabinet together? And we'll talk about some of the issues. You mentioned transportation, you mentioned housing, and they are important to economic development into the city, and how you work at the table, for instance, with the Planning and Development Authority and Transportation and Housing Department and all and those. It's very important. Midori, anything you want to offer on the strategy of the city? Anything you want to offer?
I think one thing that Bill and people in the audience may have heard before is the mayor talk a lot about is getting City Hall out of City Hall, right? So if you want to understand the needs of our communities and be responsive, whether it's a policy or program, we really need to be on the ground and hear and listen to folks and adjust, right, and adapt our policies and priorities and be responsive. And so, Segun and a few other chiefs go on these walks every week in our neighborhoods. And if anyone's interested in the audience, you're more than welcome to join. And you just, stop by all types of barbershop, bakery, professional services, you name it, and just kind of see, what the city can do better to be responsive to the needs of a community. So I think, operationally, we're very in the community and really just trying to get City Hall to City Hall, as the mayor would say.
And I will say, given that it's 90 degrees now, we are taking a break in July, but we'll come back in August. But for anyone who thinks it's not true, I do still wear my suits on these walks, no matter what the temperature is outside. So
it's true.
One of the categories you mentioned is the COVID-19. So that's an area that I wanted to talk about. And I'll just give you some of the sub questions that I had. What is the impact of COVID-19 generally on the city's economy, whether it's downtown, whether it's neighborhoods, particular industry, particular businesses, and how is the city responding, reacting, and then being proactive to rejuvenate our economy and our businesses. I don't know if we'll ever be post-COVID ever, but in terms of its greatest impact, we seem to be coming out of that. You want to take that, Segun?
Sure. And you're right. I mean, the fact that we're conducting this conversation virtually, is a reminder that COVID is still ever present. So, clearly it's been a long 2-year journey for the city, as every city and town across the country, in terms of the economic impact. Our service industry, retail, of course, again, like we've seen happen across the country, have been totally devastated because they require many of them require in-person contact. But at the end of the day, I think our how we were in the life science industry and others early has helped ensure that Boston, unlike other cities, has been able to not only rebound more quickly, but was relatively stable economically compared to other cities across the country. But we don't want to just rely on one industry as getting us out of and saving the city. We have to make sure that our smaller businesses, micro businesses, have an opportunity to thrive as we are emerging out of the COVID-19 pandemic. I will say some of the strategies were mentioned earlier. Midori mentioned the small business grants that we were able to give out, millions and millions of dollars to thousands of businesses across the city to help them survive, help them make it through the worst of the pandemic. We are still pushing these grants out because we know we're not totally out of it and they still need this support. But what matters is the investments that we're making for the future. And what I'm happy about is that the mayor approved and pushed for and proposed millions of dollars in the ARPA, her ARPA proposal, but as well as in the operating budget. So a couple of quick highlights from that is, we have put together a $5 million proposal in our main streets. This is, once, if approved by the council next week, it will be the largest investment that the city has ever made in our main streets. And the reason why this is important is that they are our boots on the ground in the commercial districts across our neighborhoods. And they're an element that's very important to helping us actualize this strategy of neighborhood revitalization. They're the ones that, alongside our neighborhood business managers, are going in person to talk to our businesses, to walk them through the process, help them get through whatever documents they have to get through, to help restore the front of their business or improve the interior of the business, to help with marketing efforts to drive more foot traffic. So all of these things are important. It's going to raise the capacity of our main streets to continue these things and to help identify where new entrepreneurs can open up shop. So that's one piece that's important, as well as our legacy business program that will help preserve long-standing businesses that have, for 20, 30, 40 years have become staples of our different neighborhoods. We saw too many of our legacy businesses have to close down as a result of the pandemic. Other things include, and I think this might be where you're headed, even around our downtown revitalization efforts. Some of the strategies that we're employing there are going to be things that we copy and paste for the rest of the city after we've proved the concept through those efforts. So things like how we are activating vacant spaces through our commercial rebate program, bringing or creating opportunities for more women and BIPOC-owned firms to be in our downtown areas and to be in the Seaport area, because we know that these are major commercial hubs, and more diversity will bring more foot traffic because people will want, more diverse communities will want to go visit those areas. So these are a few of the things that we're doing. There's a lot of things that we're doing to, help our companies and smaller businesses transition to what a hybrid future looks like, but also ways that we're trying to make the city a much more vibrant and welcoming place for people to return to work, whether it's on a full-time basis or on a hybrid basis, as we know many are exploring.
Well, you did anticipate where I was going on the business district in terms of, I'm going to talk about downtown, and I'll focus on the Congress Street, the Washington Street, that area there, and so forth. And during COVID, of course, it was a no man's land, as you know, and business is picking up somewhat. There are a lot of stores, sub stores that did not reopen, and I understand what you're trying to do there. How about the office towers? Are you engaging at all with some of the larger real estate companies in some of the businesses that maybe are reducing their footprint? So I know the businesses that we see on the street level are critically important, but then also, people tell me there used to be several thousand people in that building. Now it's significantly less, and that impacts the shopping, the eating, the drinking, all that.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you engaging with the property owners to try to get, and the employers to try to get folks back in?
Mm-hmm. So because we're government, we have a 5-point plan for for addressing the issue. I've mentioned one of them already around the vacant storefronts, but one of the other points here to this question you're raising, and I'm going to tie in one of the questions in the chat here around our engagement with the BPDA, with Chief Jemison joining, which has been amazing to have him on the team. So one of the strategies we're exploring is how to convert vacant office space into housing, affordable and otherwise, because we know that we can't just rely on the worker traffic that used to be downtown pre-pandemic. We will never get to a place, well, let me not say never, you learn not to say never, but for the foreseeable future, we're not going to get to a place where we were at 100% occupancy, where we were before, of folks coming into work every day of the week. Because we see the rebellion from many employees of not wanting to return to a 5-day in the office strategy. So that being said, we have to explore getting other types of people in these different areas. And one of those strategies is bringing in more residents to the area. And so in collaboration with the BPDA, led by Chief Jemison, we're looking at how to streamline the process for these office towers converting some of their space to affordable housing. We had a big meeting back in December of 2021 in the Eagle Room with the mayor around thinking about what our strategies should be and getting feedback from folks. And this was at the height of the Omicron variant. And then in March, as we began to come out of that variant, had another meeting here at City Hall, which the mayor attended again, where we presented to the group the 5-point plan that I shared. So vacancy, conversion, how we're activating public spaces, how we're utilizing, being a leader, utilizing City Hall Plaza when it's finished later this summer. And the 5th we already did, having our Boston Blooms block party on April 13th, which saw 110,000 folks come through the area, 600 beers were poured. I always make sure to share that. That's an important statistic, 2,000 coffees, et cetera. But so anyway, that is one of the things that we're doing in partnership with the BPDA to streamline the process. And I'll just add here too, in terms of bringing people back down, we know that what we did on April 13th has to be sustained. We can't just do a thing and think that that's going to bring people back. And so we put out a contract that was worth $300,000 under our sheltered market program, which is one of our procurement strategies to make sure that diverse businesses are getting major contracts with the city. We just awarded it to a Black women-owned business. And that firm is going to be responsible for helping to, on a regular basis, conduct these types of programs throughout the summer, early fall, to again show people what they're missing out on by not being downtown.
You, I know the clock is going fast. A couple of issues that one you just really mentioned, and you've talked about the second, is housing and transportation. Transportation. I'm not going to pick on the MBTA or anything, but the people, in order to come in, want safe and reliable public transportation. And then, of course, we have the traffic congestion. Traffic is back. And so is that going to encourage folks to want to come back into the office or into the city? And so we'll talk a little bit about transportation. And then the housing, Midori, if you could, a little bit, when you talk to employers, the question of housing affordability is very important. And both Mayor Wu talks about it, and also the governor. I saw him at 2 events recently. He talked about it in this context when he was chasing Amazon or going after Amazon to come into Boston, and they went to New York, I think, and then Washington, D.C. He said, "Why didn't you come to Massachusetts?" And they said to him, "The cost of housing." And he was, that shocks me as well, compared to New York City, I think would be the highest, and outside of Washington, D.C. So to your economic development initiatives, the issue of transportation and the issue of housing. Segun, you want to try transportation for us?
Oh yeah, this is my favorite topic, of course, because I enjoy sitting in that traffic coming into City Hall, like you mentioned. So, like I mentioned earlier, it may not be something that we are responsible for addressing as a cabinet, but certainly something that is top of mind and top of our primary focus in collaborating with Yasha, Chief Franklin Hodge, in addressing those issues. I will say one of the first meetings I had in this role as well was speaking with Secretary Jamie Tesler, who's Secretary of Transportation for the state, as well as Steve Poftak, and that was a relationship I was able to carry over from BECMA. And they're well aware, and they know, like, this is of primary importance, and so we're always in constant communication about some of the projects that we see happening throughout the city and what that impact could or may be on businesses, on commute times, et cetera, and doing our best to plan well around those necessary investments in the infrastructure of our system. But you're absolutely right. Part of what we're focused on right now is on the hiring piece for MBTA. We know that they have a huge shortage of personnel, like most of whether it be government or even in the private sector. And so for events that we do and others, we're doing our best to share the information with folks in our networks around the opportunities, because we know that some of the issues are the fact that they just don't have enough bodies to bring us back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of the routes and the schedule, et cetera. But again, like I said, it's a huge concern for companies here in Boston and I know Midori is going to be talking about housing, but those are the two top things that come up: transportation and housing. And we're doing what we can. I know the mayor in her ARPA proposals, creating free routes along MBTA. It's something we're looking to hopefully expand in partnership with the state and other partners. So we think that these efforts and others that we'll talk more about and explore this year will help to allay some of the concerns as we are trying our best to make sure that bigger investments are being made in our transportation system.
We look at our workforce on the public transportation side, whether it's, the hospital community, a lot of their workers use public transportation, the financial industry, even in South Boston, you go by a bus stop there in the morning, it's just loaded with people hopping on those buses and so forth. And so the access to transportation is just critical, and to get folks back in the commute. I mean, if folks figure that the traffic it's even longer now, they may be less inclined to want to come in or do more of a hybrid schedule. On the housing side, I know it's an issue in terms of affordable housing and in the city. Could you describe how you see the problem, how you see the issue, Midori, and how the city is trying to address it?
Sure,
And
absolutely.
and how it comes up with prospective companies?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think housing is the one of the top things that come up as businesses and companies consider Boston, right, as their headquarter, as they plan for expansion, and the cost sometimes become prohibitive. So as many of you know, Chief Sheila Dillon heads up our Office of Housing, and Mayor Wu recently put together a proposal, with Chief Dillon on $200 million investment from ARPA dollars. Still needs to council approving, but that funding has much higher emphasis on home ownership in that fund. So hopefully, that will spur sort of affordable housing stock. The other thing is that I want to mention that Chief Dillon is also leading that impacts us as well is the linkage study. So we recently retained an economist for MIT, Carl Seidman, to look at studies on what is the projected number of affordable housing that's needed, right? As we are increasing our economic activities, as we grow our jobs, as we grow our businesses, there is going to be the need for more affordable housing in that. So the linkage fees, as many of you know, I see Jonathan Greeley on the call. It triggers any commercial development over 100,000 square feet that it's gonna trigger a linkage for housing and jobs trust money that goes to train our workforce in accessing some of these jobs that are brought to Boston. So I think those are two of the things that we are working currently to look at the issue of housing, but very much a priority for the mayor and for the administration and for our cabinet because it is a business imperative in terms of economic growth and stability.
What's the prospective companies, like whether it be a hospital that says, we're recruiting doctors from other parts of the country, and one of the issues is the cost of a house here. Or a business wants to come here and they're concerned about the cost of their housing for employees. What do you hear? Do you hear anything from them?
Yeah, it's I think pre-COVID, it used to be a lot of those fire sectors, the med tech, the ed tech, right? Sort of the industries that make Boston unique than other cities because we have such high concentration of those sectors in here. But, I think post-COVID, we're hearing a lot more from our restaurant industry, our service industry, our tourism industry, right? Because ultimately, our data shows that 70% of the workers in Boston, right, commute from outside of Boston, right? So the jobs that are in Boston and that are for Boston residents, right, we need to sort of start focusing on them as well. So we're hearing from now all sectors, to be completely honest with you on that. So the study, the linkage study is really a way for us to capture, what the needs might be. We're doing surveys with workers out there to try to project, what the needs might be in the future.
Segun, how do you go about attracting a a business either to come to Boston or is here and expand. If you went to a conference and you met an industry or you reached out to an industry, how are you going about that, and what is the strategy there?
Well, that's for the second part of that question. I'm looking forward to my travel request being approved by someone at some point, because I've been stuck in this office for the last 6 months. But putting that to the side, part of the pitch is not really about attracting the companies, but talking about how we can help them retain talent when they're here or when they expand. That's been the real issue. I found that it's not really a pitch on attracting someone to come here, because of the work of many of the people on this call and others, Boston is one of the most attractive places for many companies across industries to come to. The issues are addressing exactly what we've just discussed, whether it be transportation or housing, but also how we are a place that your employees will want to live in and travel in and explore when they're not when they're out of work hours. So, you may have seen, at least on the retention piece a couple of weeks ago, that one of the jobs we're exploring is, as it was reported, a late night czar. I should clarify the record, though, as I did then, that the title of the position is the Director of Strategic Initiatives. And one of the things that they will be focused on is identifying ways to transform the nightlife experience here in Boston. You may or may not be aware that even with these liquor licenses with our restaurants, the city still kind of shuts down around 10 o'clock, no matter what day of the week it is. And that's not really something a lot of younger families and people look forward to. Folks like to be out a little later. And so Boston does not have a great image of being a fun place to be. And so one of the things that we're doing is working to address even that piece, because we see a lot of people leaving the city, not just based on the issues that were shared before, but even on whether or not it's a place that you want to go out and explore and hang out. And to date, we've not been very good at that.
Well, as you know, I'm not in that target audience, as you know. I'm not in that target audience. We're running, Midori, I want to ask you about just quick on workforce. What are you hearing? What are you saying about the need for workers? And what do you see as the next area of the workforce that we have to work to grow?
Yep. So, that's talent, right? Availability of talent in Boston is number one reason why companies and businesses want to be here, right? Access to the Harvard, MIT, BU, BC, there's tons of them. And so we're very fortunate to be able to offer that as well. But, I think with the current tight labor market, what we are hearing from businesses and employers is that they're having a hard time finding talent, right? From C-suites to entry level to mid-level managers. And I know our Office of Workforce Development has invested a lot in a lot of programs, like apprenticeship program, right? So when people hear apprenticeship program, they think of construction trades, but we've done apprenticeship in emergency medical technician, like EMTs, right? And I know Massachusetts Apprentice Network, led by Lauren Jones and BMAS Compete are also sort of looking at sort of alternative model for job training, right? So, not necessarily you don't have to go to four-year colleges, right? But you can train someone up, right? Get that skills that they need in order for them to access some of these middle skill jobs that are available in the city of Boston. So I think I'm glad to see a lot of the sort of investment are being made in the workforce development, and I'm really glad to see that employers are looking at not just degree, right, but sort of like skills based credentialing, right? What is that you bring to the table, right? And I think pre-COVID and before the tight labor market, Boston's employers are very fortunate, right? We had access to so many talent pipeline. I did an analysis through a BPD research team here, and I saw that all the companies in Boston, a lot of the major ones, required BA degree, right, for from like frontline cook to like C-suite, managers, and everything in between. When you look at national data, right, that percentage shrink, like the requirement for BA degree and stuff. So I encourage employers, in the audience today, to relocate your job description, give opportunities for non-traditional, right, students that are graduates of community colleges. I'm on the board of Benjamin Franklin Cummings Institute of Technology, great 2-year technical colleges. If you are having a hard time accessing talent, I want you to kind of look beyond what you are used to doing.
The growth in lab space, I know scientists, of course, but are there jobs there for the 2-year programs?
Yeah, you mean the life science lab, right?
Well, the labs that are growing around us, the life science companies, yeah.
Yeah, there's been a number of partnerships that were brokered by this administration, like the Benjamin Franklin have been working with Ginkgo Bioworks. They're public traded life science company in Seaport, and they specifically created a curriculum for biotechnology. I think associate, I think was the title. So I think the important thing is, yes, those jobs are for anybody, right, who have the skills and the willingness to work hard in those jobs. We just need to work closely with the employer partners to figure out what that skill competencies are, and just kind of map out, right, what are the training elements that you need in order to successfully get someone into these jobs. And sorry, one last thing I forgot to mention about employment pieces. One of the mayor's priorities also youth summer jobs program, right? So getting young people into 6 to 7 week internship pay program in many of these corporate office hours, as you mentioned, in Boston. And those are, first step into sort of world of work for young people. And, I urge folks to invest in our young people early, right? Because if you invest in them, maybe after they go to college, they come back, they don't want to come work for you and stuff. So I just want people to think about workforce development more in long-term strategy and just invest in a great program like our young people.
Every business group that we mentioned today, from the Chamber to Mass Competitive Partnership to Mass Taxpayers to AIM to the Roundtable, the constant discussion about the workforce issue, constant discussion, and then also how people are changing how they work. So it's two-pronged in there. Well, my final question, and then we've covered a lot of ground, Segun. We've covered a lot of ground today. Thank you, Midori, as well. And this is a hypothetical. We all love hypotheticals, right? You're making a presentation to a large business group comprised of various types of businesses. The title of your presentation is "The City of Boston, a place where everyone can enjoy economic equity and opportunity." What do you say, and what's your pitch?
That's the last question. 30 seconds
really,
or less, right?
That's really a combination of what you've been saying today. And,
yeah.
What's in your mission?
Well, if I can just say, because I know this will be one of the last comments, I want to thank members of our team that worked with you to make this happen. So I see Daniel on here, and I saw Kathleen and Danny from the licensing team who are here. And also, of course, just have to shout out all the different partners that we have on the call. I saw Aisha on here, and Willie Bodrick and Winston, Bob Rivers, and I'm going to get in trouble. This is why you don't ever say names, because I'm going to get in trouble for not saying other names. And I'm missing, I think I saw Mary Jo. Anyway, so on the pitch, I'll end by saying it's a proverb I've taken with me everywhere I go, but I think ties in on all this and how I would probably end the pitch. It's a proverb that says, if you want 1 year of prosperity, grow grain. If you want 10 years of prosperity, grow trees. But if you want 100 years of prosperity, grow people. And so I would invite all of the companies and all of the people thinking about moving to Boston or growing in Boston to come here and be part of Boston's future in growing people to ensure the prosperity of not just our city, but the region and the Commonwealth. So that's what I would offer.
Midori, from your point of view, from your
Well, I don't think I can top that off. So, so I would say they know that. And, I think, one of my personal sort of, I'm an immigrant. I came here as an international student. And so my pitch will be to the global sort of audience, right? Boston is a place for you, if you, for anybody that are looking to work, live, and make your life here. So come and give it a try.
Do you find Boston, we've had some things in our history that we're not proud of sometimes. Do you find Boston a hard sell, an easy sell? Do you have to explain certain things away?
Yeah, I think before it was hard. I think with things like our all-inclusive campaign and other strategies, and the fact of just the makeup of the cabinet and who our mayor is making it easier, particularly like for groups to even have their conferences here who never came to Boston because of the reputation of the city as a cold and hard place, particularly for people of color. But I think what we are displaying, not just through what we look like, but what we're fighting for and what we're implementing is helping to change the narrative across the country, that Boston, every city in America, because it's America, has racist tendencies and participates in some way in the system of racism here. But at the end of the day, we're actively working to remove the vestiges and legacy that racism has had on this city and its practices. And so that's helping to transform the narrative.
Well, I want to thank you both for taking time out from your busy schedules and to share really with us what your office is doing. So Segun, thank you very much. Midori, thank you as well. And I hope that our paths cross in the future. And I hope you'll continue to join our programs here in the future as a guest. And I hope this worked for you today as well. And thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Have a good one.
Be well. Take care, everybody. Thank you, the audience. Thank you for joining us today and hope to see you all soon. Thank you.